Tonight on Free Minds TV, we're going to be getting into Department of Homeland Security officials expanding their ability to search people's documents and computers at the border. We're also going to be getting into a national security estimate on Afghanistan, which will likely be kept secret from the American people for a particular reason. Also going to be getting into the Downsizer Dispatch and a whole lot more, all tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to an all-new episode of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
And tonight we are without our normal crew. There's a little bit of change of stuff going on because there's been an incident where our director, Lauren Canario, freedom activist and free stater, has been arrested yet again. We were talking about this on the latest edition of Free Minds TV. You can grab that archive at Free Minds Radio. You can grab that archive at freemindstv.com. But Lauren Canario was arrested based on a charge of something that happened quite a while ago when she was standing in the wrong place in the IRS building when she was out there protesting when something was going on with another freedom activist, Russell Canning. She was given an order to appear in court and have a $150 fine. She didn't pay the fine, and they finally caught up to her and arrested her, and her trial was actually today in Concord, New Hampshire.
Yeah, and it appears that essentially what Lauren had done was she had done a protest at the IRS office. So that's the reason that she had been told to leave, and she wouldn't leave because she felt that she had a right to be in essentially it's a public building.
Yeah, it's a public area, right?
Right. I mean, if they're going to take your taxes from you, I mean, it's the IRS office, you would think that in some way you own the building, since that's what the government spends its money on. But there is a specific statute where you're not allowed to protest in federal buildings.
Right, and she wasn't actually out there, you think of a protester, she wasn't going crazy and blocking business from taking place. She was just standing there, and they didn't really like that,
right.
From what I understand.
It was essentially a silent protest,
right,
where she was holding a sign and wasn't actually, interfering with their business, but they had claimed that it interfered with IRS business, or that she didn't have any business being in the building.
Right.
So she got arrested.
Apparently not liking someone's business
right,
isn't business. But the IRS has a lot of laws like this. I mean, this whole thing started with Russell Canning, who was protesting the fact that you can't give handbills. A handbill, just simply a piece of paper saying that there's something on it. This would be a handbill. My notes, my articles here, if I hand this to Nick, I expect him to read it. That's a handbill, and there's a law against that in the IRS. That's what Russell was arrested for. Then Lauren protests. She's arrested for it, ordered to pay a $150 fine. Lauren Canario doesn't believe that she owes the fine, doesn't pay it, doesn't show up to her trial, and now she's in jail for it.
Right, and she's essentially, what the judge has said is she's going to spend 15 days in prison. The maximum was 30 days, so the judge didn't hit her with the maximum penalty, but it's not like he just let her out with time served or anything like that. And the case really raises questions of whether or not you have a right to petition the government for a redress of grievances on government property, because that's when you're trying to confront a government agency or deal with whether or not we should have it at all, which is what Lauren was trying to do.
Yes.
In the case of the IRS, it seems like the most logical place to protest is either in the office or directly outside of it. And generally speaking, you're allowed to protest on what's considered public property. You can protest, you can speak your opinion on the sidewalk, you're supposed to be able to meet on the town square and
right,
say what you want, hold signs. But for whatever reason, with the federal government, they seem to have created different rules than what you typically see with the state.
Which is weird, because the federal government has this First Amendment in the Bill of Rights that says that you have the right to free speech, the right to peaceably assemble, the protesting, as well as the redress of grievances. All three of those in the very First Amendment, and she's been arrested for it. This time, I guess her official arrest is a failure to pay her fine, but 15 days for it, that's going to cost taxpayers' money.
It's a 15-day sentence. I mean, she has been. It's not like she's been a free person walking around and went to court today and got this sentence. She's already been in jail for I forget the exact number of days. A few days now. It's been since earlier this past week. But so she's serving actually more than 15 days.
Well, she does take the Gandhi philosophy to heart a lot, is be the change you want to see in the world, and this is nothing new for her. We've talked about her and had her on the show many times, not just behind the scenes, but talking about how, well, this isn't her first tour that she's been in jail for something she believes in. I think it's her actually 5th time or something.
It's going to be about 5th or 6th.
She's getting up there. But another person, just a quick side view before we move on, and maybe we'll get her on the show when she comes back to tell her side of the story if she wants to do that. But while she was at the court, there were a lot of people who were supporters of her going out and seeing her. Free staters, people who just generally believe in freedom and liberty, going out there to show their support for her. One of those people was Kat Canning of the it's New Hampshire Free Press now, I'm sorry, of the New Hampshire Free Press, and she was actually with Lauren when she was arrested the first time, ordered to pay the same fine. Like Lauren didn't pay it, so now Kat has been arrested as well and is awaiting trial in federal jail right now, waiting for her trial date to be set, and probably will get a similar sentence as Lauren got. So, a couple Free Staters behind bars right now for protesting, for being the change that they want to see in the world. I guess it doesn't always work for you, but this is kind of what they're used to. It's not the first time they've done it, and they believe that setting that change out there, setting the example, maybe wake up some people, change some of the minds of the jailers themselves even.
And the day that this broadcast is actually going to air, here locally in Keene this Friday, there's going to be an event going on at the local courthouse. Somebody who's helped on the show and is also a sponsor, Nick Ryder, he's challenging a speeding ticket in court. Well, the judge has previously ruled, when Nick has been there recording other proceedings in the court, that you can film, because the law says that they have to allow the people to film in the court. But you can't pan or zoom your camera. So it has to be a completely still shot, and if one person's talking on the other side of the room, you can't move the camera back and forth. So Dave Ridley, who's another Free Stater, another activist here in New Hampshire, is going to be challenging that, and he's going to pan and zoom his camera.
I don't know. It sounds
in a courtroom.
It sounds like some people could get hurt there. That law is for a reason, Nick. And if we didn't have these laws on the books, society would crumble. I mean, panning a camera. What if our camera guy panned our camera? Things would go out of control. We can't have that, especially in a courtroom. All right. There will be no panning.
Right. I imagine moving a camera this much is very distracting.
Yeah, it could really hurt people. So that's a law that should stay on the books. Speaking of laws that should stay or come off the books in most cases, most laws I'd be okay with. Just wiping the slate clean, and we'd be better off without them, especially the ones that are going on in Washington. Before we transition into this, we will be reporting on the Dave Ridley thing and more reports on Lauren this Sunday on Free Minds Radio, as well as probably next week on Free Minds TV. But let's move on. Let's get into some laws that people can actually have their voice be heard in, at least with the Downsizer Dispatch. Nick, what's this week's Downsizer Dispatch?
Well, this week, Downsize DC is talking about what you would expect them to be talking about at this point, which is the massive bailout package that's been proposed in DC. $700 billion in taxpayer dollars. To be honest, these dollars aren't being raised, and taxes are actually just going to be added to the budget deficit. So essentially, what the Congress is going to do here is pay for this with Visa or MasterCard. It's essentially the same concept. The government's really the only entity in the U.S. that can write bad checks that people will actually accept. So the government doesn't have $700 billion, but they want to use $700 billion that the taxpayers will ultimately end up having to pay back in one shape or form. And they're going to use this to bail out the financial market, essentially buy up bad assets, what they call illiquid assets. Now, just as kind of a brief summary of economic terms for those who don't know, a liquid asset is something that actually has value. You can actually access it and exchange it for cash or some other good or service. An illiquid asset, what they're basically saying is that these assets aren't worth anything. They're a bad investment in the marketplace. Nobody's actually going to pay money for them. So what the government's going to do here is actually assign a dollar value to mortgage packages and derivatives packages that in the marketplace, under the laws of supply and demand, there's no demand for them. There's a supply, but there's no demand, so they have no value. It's going to be interesting to see how they try to do that. But the good news is a lot of people have been speaking out, contacting their Congress people about this issue. According to a Rasmussen poll, only 7% of voters supported a bailout. So clearly the American people don't really want to use their tax dollars to bail out the financial mess. Up until very recently in the United States, we at least had, to some extent, a free market economy. When a company made bad investments, it was allowed to go bankrupt. The argument now, and what Downsize DC is talking about at downsizedc.org, is the scare tactics that the government's using. And what they're saying is they're putting themselves on the line in opposing the bailout. If the economy is actually going to tumble into another Great Depression, people aren't going to be giving their money to Downsize DC, and that organization is going to have to fold up. But if the government doesn't get involved, things aren't going to be so great economically. They're not, and even if the government does get involved. But we're not headed for another Great Depression, at least as near as I can tell. In the Great Depression, 40% of homes went to foreclosure. Currently, we're looking at about 6% as a foreclosure rate. And the trend seems to be that most of the homes that are going to foreclose have foreclosed. So the actual rate of new homes going into foreclosure seems to be tapering off a little bit. So the marketplace can correct itself. Sure, credit's going to be tight. It might be kind of hard buying a home in the next year or two. But that seems better to me than completely socializing the nation's economic system. I mean, a bailout on this magnitude, it's really the biggest government takeover of assets since Red China took over the economy of that country, or the Russian Revolution where the Bolsheviks took over there. We're talking about essentially socialism.
Now, Nick, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but you say that the government is going to artificially create this supply and demand curve by injecting these tax dollars for it. Isn't this just pushing the problem down into the future, continuing this house of cards setup that we have in the economy, where creating a supply and demand when there is none? Are we just pushing this on to our grandkids or down the line a few years? What are the long-term consequences of a bailout like this?
The proponents of the bailout are going to argue that what they're trying to do is not necessarily fix prices. It's to stop a panic. Well, to be honest, I don't see a whole lot of panic selling. The Dow has not plunged by 20% in one day. It's not a panic situation on Wall Street. Investors are simply getting rid of bad assets. They're making wise investment decisions now, finally, and that's what they need to be allowed to do. What is actually going to happen if the government steps in is, yes, they're going to prop up home prices, they're going to prop up the market, and at some point in the future we'll probably have another bubble burst. And what's also going to happen is that the dollar is going to be damaged by this, because you're increasing the amount of debt that the US government has. They're going to have to borrow for that. All of this borrowing, you can only write so many IOUs, which is essentially what the government does when it borrows money. It promises to pay them back with interest. Essentially, investors are loaning money to the US government through the Federal Reserve System, and eventually that destroys the dollar. $700 billion at this point is going to have a pretty significant impact on that. And prices of things like food and oil are already high, and one of the main reasons they go up is because of inflation that's caused by this spending money that the government doesn't have, and it will push oil prices up, it will push other prices up if this bailout goes through.
As you said, it's not the government's not going to raise taxes for this. It's just going to be a hidden tax. They'll print lots of more money for it, and all your dollars that you have in your wallet, in your bank account, will be simply worth less. So it's a tax. It's just a hidden tax, one that you don't see as much. Probably one of the most sinister taxes out there. Anyways, if you want to get involved with this, let your Congress people know. Downsizedc.org is the address you want to go to. When we come back, though, we are going to be getting into some stuff in the federal government that's going on with prisoner abuse photos. The Pentagon has been trying to keep them secret. A new court says they can't do that anymore. We'll be getting into that and a whole lot more when we come back. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
Free Minds TV is brought to you in part by Life Productions for your basic and semi-pro video production needs. From full wedding and event coverage to DVD authoring and distributions, lifeproductions.com. That's lyfproductions.com.
Thank you, Spencer. This is Mark Edge from Free Talk Live, and you're watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. As always, this is Toby.
And Nick.
All right, Nick. I want to get into this because the government keeping things a secret, I think, is a big problem. We're supposed to have an open, somewhat open government where...
Well, it's supposed to be a completely open government. I guess you can argue with certain national security issues that are actually national security issues. They use it as a cover
the
now.
way I think it is, if it's a government for the people, by the people, there should be no secrets because we're our own government, right? Or at least we're controlling the government. Doesn't seem so much anymore. Seems everything's kept a secret nowadays. And when the Pentagon's involved, there's pretty much red tape everywhere that says secret written all over it.
And it's not like most of these secrets that they're keeping are, say, a military operation that's going to happen in a particular town. I mean, those are some of the secrets they keep. But most of the secrets they keep now, they'll just say it's a national security issue because it's a convenient way to keep it out of the public's eye.
Right. I mean, okay, there are some arguments for some national security issues, I guess, depending on if it's a war situation, if you're going to be parachuting in. Anyways, we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is prisoner abuse photos, or alleged prisoner abuse photos, I guess, from Iraq and Afghanistan. What's been going on over there? This blew up a few years ago with some pictures being leaked out of Army personnel abusing certain prisoners, having them stand in stress positions for certain amounts of time, having others get naked, walk them around like dogs. And there's more pictures, alleged more pictures out there that the government, the Pentagon, has until now been covering up. And the ACLU has been trying to see what they can do about it. But so far they haven't gotten much until recently. A federal appeals court on Monday ordered the Bush administration to hand over photos depicting abuse of prisoners held by the U.S. military in Iraq and Afghanistan, handing the American Civil Liberties Union a victory in an ongoing public records lawsuit filed against the Pentagon. So, it looks like some things are now going to become a little less secret. And what do you make of this, Nick? Is this going to ruin the Army, or is it just going to point out some real flaws that we actually have that should actually be addressed rather than just sweeping them under the carpet?
Well, I mean, the military and the Bush administration claim that what they do, interrogating people, at least the tactics that they endorse, aren't torture. They're merely harsh interrogation techniques, which would describe torture if you're a fan of the English language. But yeah, basically what this is going to do is reveal exactly what it is they've been doing, and they're doing it in the name of the United States of America and the people that live in it. And if the U.S. military is torturing people, that's something that the American people should probably know. And it's kind of out there. I mean, it's sort of an open secret at this point, but if there are pictures of it, if there's documentation of who was ordering it, that should certainly be out there, because speaking from a moral basis, from the basis of U.S. law and international law, torture is wrong. And it's also something that's very much illegal for good reason. So yes, this is a good thing, and there was no real reason to keep these torture photos secret.
Yeah, well, at least we get a little bit more transparency. If it even happens, though, it would be nice if it definitely would happen, but this is just one judge in one court, so I'm sure the Pentagon is going to sue back and say, no, we can't release these photos. It would damage the military way too much. Plus, these are national secrets, Nick.
Yeah, well, why is
abuse pictures?
Yeah, why are people taking these pictures? I mean, what's the actual value of taking pictures of people that you're beating the crap out of, or you've stripped naked, or you've electrocuted? What national security interest is there in that? I mean, it's already known that that's happening. Shouldn't the American people be able to see what's being done? I mean, this doesn't provide any valuable information to terrorists or any enemies of the U.S., and I really wish people would think about it more. When they hear that something's a national security issue, think about the information that's being discussed. Is it of actual value? Is it going to allow terrorists to escape? I'd say 90% of the time, what they refuse to talk about on the grounds of national security has nothing to do with an actual issue of an actual secret that needs to be kept to protect us from an attack. It's simply politicians and people either in the military or whatever federal agency they work for trying to protect themselves, because these pictures are going to be pretty damaging if they actually get out there, and they could be used to convict a number of people. And I hope they are.
Oh, yeah, we couldn't do that. Actually convict people who tortured people in the name of the U.S. We're supposed to be the good guys here. Freest nation in the world, going out and liberating other people. Meanwhile, we have prisoner abuse pictures we're trying to keep secret from the world. So it's not my kind of America that I imagine, where this stuff's kept secret and we're not prosecuting the people who are responsible for this. Because if I am going to have a beautiful picture of America, it's going to be one where we don't torture people. It's that simple. I mean, how much further can you get? I haven't yet talked to people who think that we should be torturing. I know they're out there. I know they're listening. I've never gotten to meet one of you, though.
And, you know, there are some people who will say if there's a ticking time bomb and you know that the person...
It's a different scenario,
it's a hypothetical, but to be honest, torture is being used fairly broadly. I was listening to a report on NPR today about a journalist in Afghanistan who... they said he had connections to the Taliban. Well, he had done some reporting on the Taliban, so he had met with some of these people in the legitimate capacity of a journalist, and he was held for months and months and tortured.
There was a ticking time bomb that had like a 4-month timer on it. Anyways,
he was the U.S. did kind of a rendition to the Afghan government that he was beaten, had his ribs broken, and he was released earlier this week. They didn't deem him a threat. Oops, we tortured you for a few months.
Bad.
We took you away from your family.
But they didn't even apologize.
Right.
So.
I mean, they tell you that they had told him that he wasn't going to get a trial. His life was over. He had disappeared, and that's one psychological attempt to break somebody. Then they proceeded to actually use physical force against him. But he, in his particular case, other than being attacked by some Afghan guards, he hadn't had too much in the way of abuse. But it's happening. And sometimes it's happening when there's no actual reason to even be extracting information. What we saw at Abu Ghraib was essentially just torture for the fun of it, essentially. I mean, it was just wanton cruelty, and they weren't actually interrogating people. They were just torturing their prisoners.
Well, I want to hear from you, the viewer. If you guys think that we should be torturing people, you disagree with us, you think it's in the nation's best interest to do that, give us a call on our talkback line, 206-350-0123, 206-350-0123, or you can always drop us an email, fmtv@freemindstv.com. All right, Nick, we've got time for one more story here. I know you've got a couple of them, but one thing I wanted to get into is the expanding of border security. It's already been hyped up so much since 2001, 9/11. It's getting even more hyped up. What's the Department of Homeland Security doing this time?
What the Department of Homeland Security is now going to be able to do, and this isn't a completely new policy, but there's been some documents released that kind of back up exactly what they're going to do. They're going to be able to search, whether they're written records or if you bring a laptop through the border or through customs, they're going to be able to search those records without probable cause, without even having reasonable suspicion. This overturns a 2-decade-old policy, which had required border agents to have reasonable suspicion that that the documents would reveal some kind of criminal activity or terrorist activity, something like that. They had to have reasonable suspicion to even read them. And then if they read them and they found something that seemed like it might indicate that they had some evidence there, then they needed probable cause to actually make copies of the documents and make evidence out of them. Now, they can pretty much confiscate it for whatever reason they want. They have to, if they have any suspicion at all, they don't really have to justify it to any standard. So they can merely say, I feel like searching you today. They don't have to say, you look suspicious because. They can just say, you look suspicious.
Now, here's my question, Nick. Is this new legislation that created this, or is this just the department gets to make a new rule? Because this seems like something that has to be checked, have a constitutional check to see if it passes the constitutional muster. The legislation do this, or is this them just changing their mind or saying the Patriot Act allowed it to happen before, so we're under the Patriot Act, we're allowed to expand our power? And that's probably what I'm looking at as what they're doing.
The Department of Homeland Security merely expanded its own authorization. So they took their policy and they said, this is the guidelines that we're going to use on what justifies a search. Now, the ACLU, or I'm sorry, no, the ALC, not sure which that refers to, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the Asian Law Caucus, and the Electronic Frontier Foundation are going to be kind of fighting this. They're hoping that Congress is going to actually pass legislation. And I'll bring it back to downsizedc.org for a minute. One of their proposals is called the Write the Laws Act. What many Americans don't realize is that Congress doesn't pass a lot of the federal laws that you have to follow. They're actually written by the executive branch itself. The Department of Homeland Security writes its own policies and can just grant itself more power. And this isn't unique to the Department of Homeland Security, and it's not unique to a post-9/11 environment for a lot of people who would just blame the Bush administration. It goes much deeper than that. Agencies like the Drug Enforcement Administration, the FDA, the ATF, they write their own policy. The Congress has essentially given them the power to write law, and these are unelected bureaucrats.
Yeah, that definitely sounds unconstitutional to me, but that wouldn't stop the government any time before. Anyways, we're just about out of time tonight. Time flies when you're having fun, I guess. If you'd like to contact us, anything different, drop us an email or leave us a number on our talkback line. Once again, fmtv@freemindstv.com or 206-350-0123. Hey, if you're not busy this Sunday from, 3 to 5 Eastern Standard Time, Free Minds Radio, the other half of the show we do, was just picked up and is now nationally syndicated by GCN Radio Network. And we are starting on 4 stations. Don't even remember where they are.
Kalispell, Montana, Canton, Ohio, Bowling. There's a couple.
They're on our website, freemindstv.com. Yes. If you're in one of those areas, pick us up on the radio, the terrestrial radio, Real Radio Now, or you can always listen live on the Free Talk live stream. That's all up at FreeMindsTV or FreeMindsRadio.com. Also, watch us on Stickam if you want. Get involved with the chat there. Live radio show from 3 to 5 p.m. every Sunday now. Expanded the time by an hour. So check it out, freemindstv.com.
And if you're a local viewer, you're watching here in the Keene area, consider giving a local talk radio station a call over at WKBK. Let them know if you like Free Minds TV, if you like Free Minds Radio, if you like what we talk about and you want to hear it here in Keene or anywhere else where people are watching us, either online or on their public access channel. Give your local station manager a call and tell them you like the show. It does have an influence on what stations decide to carry it. So.
All right. Well, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Thanks so much to the crew who helped us out today. Lauren is in jail. The rest of the crew's out there protesting for us. So thanks a lot, Mike, for coming in, helping out with the show, and Brenna as well. Thanks so much. Have a great night.